Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, translated by Constance Garrett. If it hadn't been for that, would you have given her the slip? I don't know what to say. It was scarcely the document restrained me. I didn't want to go anywhere else. Marfa Petrovna herself invited me to go abroad, seeing I was bored. But I've been abroad before and always felt sick there. For no reason but the sunshine, the Bay of Naples, the sea. You look at them and it makes you sad. What's most revolting is that one is really sad. No, it's better at home. Here, at least, one blames others for everything and excuses oneself. I should have gone perhaps on an expedition to the North Pole because je l'avais mauvais and hate drinking, and there's nothing left but wine. I have tried it, but I say, I've been told Berg is going up in a great balloon next Sunday from the Yusupov Garden and will take up passengers at a fee. Is it true? Why would you go up? I? No, oh no, muttered Drigalov, really seeming to be deep in thought. What does he mean? Is he in earnest? Raskolnikov wondered. No, the document didn't restrain me. Svidrigailov went on meditatively. It was my own doing not leaving the country, and nearly a year ago, Marfa Petrovna gave me back the document on my name day and made me a present of a considerable sum of money, too. She had a fortune, you know. You see how I trust you, Arkady Ivanovich. That was actually her expression. You don't believe she used it. But do you know, I managed the estate quite decently. They know me in the neighborhood. I ordered books too. Marfa Petrovna at first approved, but afterwards she was afraid of my overstudying. You seem to be missing Marfa Petrovna very much. Missing her? Perhaps. Really, perhaps I am. And by the way, do you believe in ghosts? What ghosts? Why, ordinary ghosts. Do you believe in them? Perhaps not. Who player? I wouldn't say no exactly. Do you see them then? Svidrigailov looked at him rather oddly. Marfa Petrovna is pleased to visit me, he said, twisting his mouth into a strange smile. How do you mean she is pleased to visit you? She has been 3 times. I saw her first on the very day of the funeral, an hour after she was buried. It was the day before I left to come here. The second time was the day before yesterday, at daybreak, on the journey at the station of Malaya, Kera. And the third time was 2 hours ago in the room where I am staying. I was alone. Were you awake? Quite awake. I was wide awake every time. She comes, speaks to me for a minute, and goes out at the door. Always at the door. I can almost hear her. What made me think that something of the sort must be happening to you? Raskolnikov said suddenly. At the same moment, he was surprised at having said it. He was much excited. What? Did you think so? Svidrigailov asked in astonishment. Did you really? Didn't I say that there was something in common between us, eh? You never said so, Raskolnikov cried sharply and with heat. Didn't I? No, I thought I did. When I came in and saw you lying with your eyes shut, pretending, I said to myself at once, here's the man. What do you mean by the man? What are you talking about? Cried Raskolnikov. What do I mean? I really don't know. Svidrigailov muttered ingenuously, as though he too were puzzled. For a moment they were silent. They started again after staring each other's faces. That's all nonsense, Raskolnikov shouted with vexation. What does she say when she comes to you? She? Would you believe it? She talks of the silliest trifles, and man is a strange creature. It makes me angry. The first time she came in, I was tired, the funeral service, the funeral ceremony, the lunch afterwards. At last, I was left alone in my study. I lighted a cigar and began to think. She came in at the door. You've been so busy today, Arkady Ivanovich. You have forgotten to wind the dining room clock, she said. All those 7 years, I wound that clock every week. And if I forgot it, she would always remind me. The next day, I set off on my way here. I got out at the station at daybreak. I'd been asleep, tired out, with my eyes half open. I was drinking some coffee. I looked up, and there was suddenly Marfa Petrovna sitting beside me with a pack of cards in her hands. Shall I tell you your fortune for the journey? Arkady Ivanovich, she was great hand at telling fortunes. I shall never forgive myself for not asking her to. I ran away in a fright, and besides, the bell rang. I was sitting today feeling very heavy after a miserable dinner from a cook shop. I was sitting smoking. All of a sudden, Marfa Petrovna again. She came in a very smart, in a new green silk dress with long train. Good day, Arkady Ivanovich. How do you like my dress? Aniska can't make like this. Aniska was the dressmaker in the country, one of our former serf girls who had been trained in Moscow. A pretty wench. She stood turning around before me. I looked at the dress and then I looked carefully, very carefully at her face. I wonder you trouble to come to me about such trifles, Marfa Petrovna. Good gracious, you won't let one disturb you about anything. To tease her, I said, I want to get married, Marfa Petrovna. That's just like you, Arkady Ivanovich. It does you very little credit to come looking for a bride when you've hardly buried your wife. And if you could make a good choice, at least. But I know it won't be for your happiness or hers. You will only be a laughing stock to all good people. Then she went out and her train seemed to rustle. Isn't it nonsense, eh? But perhaps you are telling lies, Raskolnikov put in. I rarely lie, answered Svidrigailov, thoughtfully, apparently not noticing the rudeness of the question. And in the past, have you ever seen ghosts before? Yeah, yes, I have seen them, but only once in my life, 6 years ago. I had a serf, Filka. Just after his burial, I called out, forgetting Filka my pipe. He came in and went to the cupboard where my pipes were. I sat still and thought, he is doing it out of revenge because we had a violent quarrel just before his death. How dare you come in with a hole in your elbow? I said, go away, you scamp. He turned and went out and never came again. I didn't tell Marfa Petrovna at the time. I wanted to have a service sung for him, but I was ashamed. You should go to a doctor. I know I'm not well, without your telling me, though I don't know what's wrong. I believe I am 5 times as strong as you are. I didn't ask you whether you believe that ghosts are seen, but whether you believe that they exist. No, I won't believe it, Raskolnikov cried with a positive anger. What do people generally say? Muttered Svidrigailov, as though speaking to himself, looking aside and bowing his head. They say you are ill, so what appears to you is only unreal fantasy. But that's not strictly logical. I agree that ghosts only appear to the sick, but that only proves that they are unable to appear except to the sick, not that they don't exist. Nothing of the sort, Raskolnikov insisted irritably. No, you don't think so, Svidrigailov went on, looking at him deliberately. But what do you say to this argument? Help me with it. Ghosts are, as it were, shreds and fragments of other worlds, the beginning of them. A man in health has, of course, no reason to see them because he is above all a man of this earth and is bound for the sake of completeness and order to live only in this life. But as soon as one is ill, as soon as the normal earthly order of the organism is broken, one begins to realize the possibility of another world. And the more seriously ill one is, the closer becomes one's contact with the other world. So that as soon as the man dies, he steps straight into that world. I thought of that long ago. If you believe in the future, you could believe in that too. I don't believe in a future life, said Raskolnikov. Svidrigailov sat lost in thought. And what if there are only spiders there and something of that sort? He said suddenly. He is a madman, thought Raskolnikov. We always imagine eternity as something beyond our conception, something vast, vast. But why must it be vast? Instead of all that, what if it's one little room like a bathhouse in the country? Black and grimy, and spiders in every corner, and that's all eternity is. I sometimes fancy it like that. Can it be? You can imagine nothing juster and more comforting than that. Raskolnikov cried with a feeling of anguish. Juster? And how can we tell? Perhaps that is just. And do you know, it's what I would certainly have made it, answered Svidrigailov with a vague smile. This horrible answer sent a cold chill through Raskolnikov. Svidrigailov raised his head, looked at him, and suddenly began laughing. Only think, he cried. Half an hour ago, we had never seen each other. We regarded each other as enemies. There is a matter unsettled between us. We've thrown it aside and away. We've gone into the abstract. Wasn't I right in saying that we were birds of a feather? Kindly allow me, Raskolnikov went on irritably, to ask you to explain why you have honored me with your visit. And and I am in a hurry. I have no time to waste. I want to go out. By all means, your sister, Avdotia Romanovna, is going to be married to Mr. Luzahin, Pyotr Petrovich. Can you refrain from any question about my sister and from mentioning her name? I can't understand how you dare utter her name in my presence if you really are Svidrigailov. Why? But I've come here to speak about her. How can I avoid mentioning her? Very good, speak, but make haste. I'm sure that you must have formed your own opinion of this Mr. Luzahin, who is a connection of mine through my wife. If you have only seen him for half an hour, or heard any facts about him, he is no match for Avdotia Romanovna, I believe. Avdotia Romanovna is sacrificing herself generously and imprudently for the sake of her family. I fancied from all I had heard of you that you would be very glad if the match could be broken off without the sacrifice of worldly advantages. Now I know you personally, I am convinced of it. And this is very naive. Excuse me, I should have said impudent on your part, said Raskolnikov. You mean to say that I am seeking my own ends? Don't be uneasy, Rodion Romanovich. If I were working for my own advantage, I would not have spoken out so directly. I'm not quite a fool. I will confess something psychologically curious about that. Just now, defending my love for Avdotia Romanovna, I said I was myself the victim. Well, let me tell you that I've no feeling of love now, not the slightest. so that I wonder myself indeed, for I really did feel something. Through idleness and depravity, Raskolnikov put in. I certainly am idle and depraved, but your sister has such qualities that even I could not help being impressed by them. But that's all nonsense, as I see myself now. Have you seen that long? I began to be aware of it before, but was only perfectly sure of it the day before yesterday, almost at the moment I arrived in Petersburg. I still fancied in Moscow, though, that I was coming to try to get Avdotia Romanovna's hand and to cut out Mr. Luzahin. Excuse me for interrupting you. Kindly be brief and come to the object of your visit. I'm in a hurry. I want to go out. With the greatest pleasure. On arriving here and determining on a certain journey, I should like to make some necessary preliminary arrangements. I left my children with an aunt. They are well provided for and they have no need of me personally. And a nice father I should make too. I have taken nothing but what Marfa Petrovna gave me a year ago. That's enough for me. Excuse me, I'm just coming to the point. Before the journey, which may come off, I want to settle Mr. Luzahin too. It's not that I detest him so much, but it was through him I quarreled with Marfa Petrovna when I learned that she had dished up this marriage. I want now to see Avdotia Romanovna through your mediation, and if you like, in your presence, to explain to her that in the first place she will never gain anything but harm from Mr. Luzahin. Then, begging her pardon for all past unpleasantness, to make her a present of 10,000 rubles and so assist the rupture with Mr. Luzahin, a rupture to which I believe she is herself not disinclined if she could see the way to it. You are certainly mad, cried Raskolnikov, not so much angered as astonished. How dare you talk like that? I knew you would scream at me. But in the first place, though I'm not rich, this 10,000 rubles is perfectly free. I'm absolutely in no need of it. If Avdotia Romanovna does not accept it, I shall waste it in some foolish way. That's the first thing. Secondly, my conscience is perfectly easy. I make the offer with no ulterior motive. You may not believe it, but in the end, Avdotia Romanovna and you will know. The point is that I did actually cause your sister, whom I greatly respect, some trouble and unpleasantness, and so, sincerely regretting it, I want not to compensate, not to repay her for the unpleasantness, but simply to do something to her advantage, to show that I am not, after all, privileged to do nothing but harm. If there were a millionth fraction of self interest in my offer, I should not have made it so openly, and I should not have offered her 10,000 only, when 5 weeks ago I offered her more. Besides, I may perhaps very soon marry a young lady, and that alone ought to prevent suspicion of any design on Avdotia Romanovna. In conclusion, let me say that in marrying Mr. Luzahin, she is taking money just the same, only from another man. Don't be angry, Rodion Romanovich. Think it over coolly and quietly. Svidrigailov himself was exceedingly cool and quiet as he was saying this. I beg you to say no more, said Raskolnikov. In any case, this is unpardonable impertinence. Not in the least. Then a man may do nothing but harm to his neighbor in this world and is prevented from doing the tiniest bit of good by trivial conventional formalities. That's absurd. If I died, for instance, and left that sum to your sister in my will, surely she won't refuse it. Very likely she would. Oh, no, indeed. However, if you refuse it, so be it. Though 10,000 rubles is a capital thing to have on occasion. In any case, I beg you to repeat what I have said to Avdotia Romanovna. No, I won't. In that case, Rodion Romanovich, I shall be obliged to try and see her myself and worry her by doing so. And if I do tell her, will you not try to see her? I don't know really what to say. I should like very much to see her once more. Don't hope for it. I'm sorry, but you don't know me. Perhaps we may become better friends. You think we may become friends? And why not? Svidrigailov said, smiling. He stood up and took his hat. I didn't quite intend to disturb you, and I came here without reckoning on it, though I was very much struck by your face this morning. I saw you by chance. I kept fancying there is something about you like me. But don't be uneasy. I'm not intrusive. I used to get on all right with card sharpeners, and I never bored Prince Frisbee, a great personage who is a distant relation of mine, and I could write about Raphael's Madonna in Madame Likov's album, and I never left Marfa Petrovna's side for 7 years. And I used to stay the night at Vyazemsky's house in the Haymarket in the old days, and I may go up in a balloon with Berg, perhaps. Oh, all right. Are you starting soon on your travels, may I ask? What travels? Why, on that journey, you spoke of it yourself. A journey? Oh, yes, I did speak of a journey. Well, that's a wide subject. If only you knew what you are asking. He added and gave a sudden loud, short laugh. Perhaps I'll get married instead of the journey. They are making a match for me. Here? Yes. How have you had the time for that? But I am very anxious to see Avdotya Romanovna once. I earnestly beg it. Well, goodbye for the present. Oh, yes, I have forgotten something. Tell your sister, Rodion Romanovich, that Marfa Petrovna remembered her in her will and left her 3,000 rubles. That's absolutely certain. Marfa Petrovna arranged it a week before her death, and it was done in my presence. Avdotya Romanovna will be able to receive the money in 2 or 3 weeks. Are you telling the truth? Yes, tell her. Well, your servant, I am staying very near you. As he went out, Svidrigailov ran up against Razumihin in the doorway. Chapter 2. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The two young men hurried to Akalayev's to arrive before Luzahin. Why, who was that? Asked Razumihin as soon as they were in the street. Svidrigailov, that landowner in whose house my sister was insulted when she was their governess. Through his persecuting her with his attentions, she was turned out by his wife, Marfa Petrovna. This Marfa Petrovna begged Donya's forgiveness afterwards, and she's just died suddenly. It was of her we were talking this morning. I don't know why I'm so afraid of that man. He came here at once after his wife's funeral. He is very strange and is determined on doing something. We must guard Donya from him. That's what I wanted to tell you. Do you hear? Guard her. What can he do to harm Avdotya Romanovna? Thank you, Rodya, for speaking to me like that. We will guard her. Where does he live? I don't know. Why didn't you ask? What a pity. I'll find out though. Did you see him? Asked Raskolnikov after a pause. Yes, I noticed him. I noticed him well. You did really see him. You saw him clearly, Raskolnikov insisted. Yes, I remember him perfectly. I should know him in 1,000. I have a good memory for faces. They were silent again. That's all right, muttered Raskolnikov. Do you know, I keep thinking that it may have been a hallucination. What do you mean? I don't understand you. Well, you all say, Raskolnikov went on, twisting his mouth into a smile, that I'm mad. I thought just now that perhaps I really am mad and have only seen a phantom. What do you mean? Why, who can tell? Perhaps I am really mad, and perhaps everything that happened all these days may only be imaginary. Ah, Rodya, you have been upset again. But what did he say? What did he come for? Raskolnikov did not answer. Razumihin thought a minute. Now let me tell you my story, he began. I came to you. You were asleep. Then we had dinner and I went to Porphyry's. Zametov was still with him. I tried to begin, but it was of no use. I couldn't speak in the right way. They don't seem to understand and can't understand, but are not a bit ashamed. I drew Porphyry to the window and began talking to him, but it was still no use. He looked away and I looked away. At last I shook my fist in his ugly face and told him as a cousin I'd brain him. He merely looked at me. I cursed and came away. That was all. It was very stupid. To Zametov, I didn't say a word. But you see, I thought I'd made a mess of it. But as I went downstairs, a brilliant idea struck me. Why would we trouble? Of course, if you were in any danger or anything, but why need you care? You didn't care a hang for them. We shall have a laugh at them afterwards, and if I were in your place, I'd mystify them more than ever. How ashamed they'll be afterwards. Hang them. We can trash them afterwards, but let's laugh at them now. To be sure, answered Raskolnikov. But what will you say tomorrow? He thought of himself. Strange to say, till that moment it had never occurred to him to wonder what Razumihin would think when he knew. As he thought of it, Raskolnikov looked at him. Razumihin's account of his visit to Porphyry had very little interest for him. So much had come and gone since then. In the corridor, they came upon Luzahin. He had arrived punctually at 8 and was looking for the number, so that all three went in together without greeting or looking at one another. The young men walked in first, while Pyotr Petrovitch, for good manners, lingered a little in the passage, taking off his coat. Pulcheria Alexandrovna came forward at once to greet him in the doorway. Donya was welcoming her brother. Pyotr Petrovitch walked in and quite amiably, though with redoubled dignity, bowed to the ladies. He looked, however, as though he were a little put out and could not yet recover himself. Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who seemed also a little embarrassed, hastened to make them all sit down at the round table, where a samovar was boiling. Donya and Luzahin were facing one another on opposite sides of the table. Razumihin and Raskolnikov were facing Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Razumihin was next to Luzahin, and Raskolnikov was beside his sister. At a moment's silence followed. Pyotr Petrovitch deliberately drew out a cambric handkerchief reeking of scent and blew his nose with an air of benevolent man who felt himself slighted and was firmly resolved to insist on an explanation. In the passage, the idea had occurred to him to keep on his overcoat and walk away, and so give the two ladies a sharp and emphatic lesson and make them feel the gravity of the position. But he could not bring himself to do this. Besides, he could not endure uncertainty and he wanted an explanation. If his request had been so openly disobeyed, there was something behind it, and in that case, it was better to find it out beforehand. It rested with him to punish them, and there would always be time for that. I trust you had a favorable journey, he inquired officially of Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Oh, yes, Pyotr Petrovitch. I am gratified to hear it. And Avdotya Romanovna is not over fatigued either. I am young and strong. I don't get tired, but it was a great strain for my mother, answered Donya. That's unavoidable. Our national railways are of terrible length. Mother Russia, as they say, is a vast country. In spite of all my desire to do so, I was unable to meet you yesterday, but I trust all passed off without inconvenience. Oh no, Pyotr Petrovich, it was all terribly disheartening. Pulcheria Alexandrovna hastened to declare with peculiar intonation. And if Dmitri Prokofovich had not been sent to us, I really believe by God Himself we should have been utterly lost. Here he is. Dmitry Prokofich Razumihin, she added, introducing him to Luzhin. I had the pleasure yesterday, muttered Pyotr Petrovich with a hostile glance sidelong at Razumihin. Then he scowled and was silent. Pyotr Petrovich belonged to that class of persons on the surface, very polite in society, who make a great point of punctiliousness, but who directly they are crossed in any thing are completely disconcerted and become more like sacks of flour than elegant and lively men of society. Again, all was silent. Raskolnikov was obstinately mute. Avdotia Romanovna was unwilling to open the conversation too soon. Razumihin had nothing to say, so Pulcheria Alexandrovna was anxious again. Marfa Petrovna is dead. Have you heard? She began, having recourse to her leading item of conversation. To be sure, I heard so. I was immediately informed, and I have come to make you acquainted with the fact that Arkady Ivanovich Svidrigailov set off in haste for Petersburg immediately after his wife's funeral. So at least I have excellent authority for believing. To Petersburg? Here? Donya asked in alarm and looked at her mother. Yes, indeed, and doubtless not without some design, having in view the rapidity of his departure and all the circumstances preceding it. Good heavens! Won't he leave Donya in peace even here? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. I imagine that neither you nor Avdotia Romanovna have any grounds for uneasiness, unless, of course, you are yourselves desirous of getting into communication with him. For my part, I am on my guard and am now discovering where he is lodging. Oh, Pyotr Petrovich, you would not believe what a fright you have given me. Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on. I've only seen him twice, but I thought him terrible, terrible. I'm convinced that he was the cause of Marfa Petrovna's death. It's impossible to be certain about that. I have precise information. I do not dispute that he may have contributed to accelerate the course of events by the moral influence, so to say, of the affront. But as to the general conduct and moral characteristics of that personage, I am in agreement with you. I do not know whether he is well off now, and precisely what Marfa Petrovna left him. This will be known to me within a very short period. But no doubt here in Petersburg, if he has any pecuniary resources, he will relapse at once into his old ways. He is the most depraved and abjectly vicious specimen of that class of men. I have considerable reason to believe that Marfa Petrovna, who was so unfortunate as to fall in love with him and to pay his debts 8 years ago, was of service to him also in other ways. Solely by her exertions and sacrifices, a criminal charge involving an element of fantastic and homicidal brutality, for which he might well have been sentenced to Siberia, was hushed up. That's the sort of man he is, if you care to know. Good heavens, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov listened attentively. Are you speaking the truth when you say that you have good evidence of this? Donya asked sternly and emphatically. I only repeat what I was told in secret by Marfa Petrovna. I must observe that from the legal point of view, the case was far from clear. There was, I believe, still is, living here a woman called Slitch, a foreigner who lent small sums of money at interests and did other commissions. And with this woman, Svidrigailov had for a long while close and mysterious relations. She had a relation, a niece, I believe, living with her, a deaf and dumb girl of 15 or perhaps not more than 14. Reslick hated this girl and grudged her every crust. She used to beat her mercilessly. One day the girl was found hanging in the garret. At the inquest, the verdict was suicide. After the usual proceedings, the matter ended, but later on, information was given that the child had been cruelly outraged by Svidrigailov. It is true, this was not clearly established. The information was given by another German woman of loose character, whose word could not be trusted. No statement was actually made to the police, thanks to Marfa Petrovna's money and exertions. It is not a beyond gossip, and yet the story is a very significant one. You heard, no doubt, of Dotya Romanovna when you were with them the story of the servant Philip who died of ill treatment he received 6 years ago, before the abolition of serfdom. I heard, on the contrary, that this Philip hanged himself. Quite so, but what drove him, or rather perhaps disposed him, to suicide was the systematic persecution and severity of Mr. Svidrigailov. I don't know that, answered Donia dryly. I only heard a queer story that Philip was a sort of hypochondriac, a sort of domestic philosopher, the servants used to say. He read himself silly, and that he hanged himself partly on account of Mr. Svidrigailov's mockery of him and not his blows. When I was there, he behaved well to the servants, and they were actually fond of him, though they certainly did blame him for Philip's death. I perceive, Avdotia Romanovna, that you seem disposed to undertake his defense all of a sudden. Luzahin observed, twisting his lips into an ambiguous smile. There is no doubt that he is an astute man, and insinuating where ladies are concerned, of which Marfa Petrovna, who has died so strangely, is a terrible instance. My only desire has been to be of service to you and your mother, with my advice in view of the renewed efforts which may certainly be anticipated from him. For my part, it's my firm conviction that he will end in a debtor's prison again. Marfa Petrovna had not the slightest intention of setting anything substantial on him, having regard for his children's interests, and if she left him anything, it would only be the merest sufficiency, something insignificant and ephemeral, which would not last a year for a man of his habits. Pyotr Petrovitch, I beg you, said Donya, say no more of Mr. Svidrigailov. It makes me miserable. He has just been to see me, said Raskolnikov, breaking the silence for the first time. There were exclamations from all, and they all turned to him. Even Pyotr Petrovitch was roused. An hour and a half ago he came in when I was asleep, waked me, and introduced himself. Raskolnikov continued. He was fairly cheerful and at ease and quite hopes that we shall become friends. He is partly anxious, by the way, Donya, for an interview with you, at which he asked me to assist. He has a proposition to make to you, and he told me about it. He told me that, too, that a week ago, before her death, Marfa Petrovna left you 3,000 rubles in her will, Donya, and that you can receive the money very shortly. Thank God, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, crossing herself. Pray for her soul, Donya. It's a fact, broke from Luzahin. Tell us, what more? Donya urged Raskolnikov. Then he said that he wasn't rich and all the state was left to his children who are now with an aunt. Then that he was staying somewhere not far from me. But where, I don't know. I didn't ask. But what? What does he want to propose to Donya? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna in a fright. Did he tell you? Yes. What was it? I'll tell you afterwards. Raskolnikov ceased speaking and turned his attention to his tea. Pyotr Petrovich looked at his watch. I'm compelled to keep a business engagement, and so I shall not be in your way, he added with an air of some pique and began getting up. Don't go, Pyotr Petrovich, said Donya. You intended to spend the evening. Besides, you wrote yourself that you wanted to have an explanation with mother. Precisely so, Avdotia Romanovna, Pyotr Petrovich answered impressively, sitting down again but still holding his hat. I certainly desired an explanation with you and your honored mother upon a very important point indeed. But as your brother cannot speak openly in my presence of some proposals of Mr. Svidrigailov, I too do not desire and am not able to speak openly, in the presence of others, of certain matters of greatest gravity. Moreover, my most weighty and urgent request has been disregarded. Assuming an aggrieved air, Luzahin relapsed into dignified silence. Your request that my brother should not be present at our meeting was disregarded solely at my instance, said Donya. You wrote that you had been insulted by my brother. I think that this must be explained at once, and you must be reconciled. And if Rodia really has insulted you, then he should and will apologize. Pyotr Petrovich took a stronger line. There are insults, Avdotia Romanovna, which no goodwill can make us forget. There is a line in everything which it is dangerous to overstep, and when it has been overstepped, there is no return.